Thank you, Alex. So, Dominik.
Hi.
So we're really excited to be here today. With Dominik, as Alex was just saying. He's the solo founder of Packative, solo founder and CEO. He's originally from Austria. He's been living here for 10 years, so it's going to be super interesting to see what your experience has been here. Some of us have been here for just a few days, and it's been super eye-opening. So Packative started in 2021, and you've had 725% growth. I think I got that number right?
Yeah, right.
Since 2021, you're disrupting packaging in Korea. Dominik, tell us a bit about Packative. What do you do? What is the company about?
Sure. So Packative is an on-demand packaging platform that allows full customization online for packaging for any kind of size of business. So starting from small quantity to large quantity production. And we are pretty much the first in Korea who launched an online platform for packaging.
That's amazing. So you are originally a software engineer, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Right, yeah.
So what brought you from Austria to Korea, and what brought you to start Packative, to become an entrepreneur in Korea?
That's a really good question. So actually, I was, first time in Korea, I think it was 2010 here, and I experienced Korea as this really growing country, really high-tech, and at the same time, Korea didn't use too much document management solution, and this was my background. So I thought, well, how about my company comes here and builds a branch office? So I pretty much pitched this to my partners in Austria, and then we built a branch office 3 years later in 2013. So it took some convincing for them, and also at the same time, it was a bit naive to think to just come to Korea, open a branch office without speaking any Korean.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure we can talk about this a bit more later. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually very curious I feel it would be very challenging to open a business here, to start from zero. Are there any specific challenges that you could share with some of the founders we have here? Like, what challenges did you encounter starting up here in Korea, and how did you sort of navigate them?
Right. So for us, it's specifically a bit different as we deal with a really old industry. So we deal with a factory industry, packaging industry. So it's pretty much whatever you have seen in the last days in Korea, it's a totally different world. So when it comes to packaging, it's back in the 1780s, and this is why we could like really improve this whole processes here. So I faced a lot of challenges dealing with factories at the beginning. This is more of the business side, and then also, of course, I had to learn the language. I had to build a team. I had to hire locals, and that comes with a lot of different challenges and leadership challenges, especially too. Yeah.
I can imagine. So right now you speak fluent Korean?
I wouldn't say fluent. So when I speak Korean, I feel like I'm this 15 years old teenager boy. So I'm not that confident speaking it to my business, but it's totally fine with my team. So my team, I trust them, they trust me, so I'm okay with speaking with them in meetings. Most of our meetings are in Korean, so I think it's okay, but I wouldn't be as confident as I'm in German or in English.
And how about the work culture? Because I understand there's probably lots of differences between work culture in Europe and here in Asia, or here in Korea specifically. Did you find any challenges there as well when building your company?
Yeah, so for sure. So there's this one part of, I'm still Austrian. Even though I've been living in Korea for the last 11 years, I have my values. I grew up in a certain way in Austria, and this is hard for me to change. So building a company culture also brings in a lot of me, of course, as I'm the CEO, as I'm the solo founder. But at the same time, I have to adjust and also have a Korean company culture somehow mixed in between. So I think we trying to find a good balance between having a Western culture and Korean culture. It's tricky at the same time, but yeah, we
absolutely. I can imagine having different mindsets, different backgrounds, different experiences. That should be super challenging. We always talk about with founders, when you're talking to entrepreneurs and founders, it's very important to build a support system, right? Entrepreneurs with mentors, other founders, or local networks. What's been your experience with that? Did you build up, were you able to build like a group of mentors, and what kind of profiles were they?
Yeah, so actually I was really lucky. So while we were building Packative, while I was building Packative in 2020, I had the idea and started out, and there was this Seoul Global Startup Center called, and it was running for around 4 years, I think, 3 years before that, and then with me 1 year more. And this had like a mentor pool of entrepreneurs, Korean entrepreneurs, business people. It was organized by the Seoul city government, and it was really amazing. We had like an incubator office. We had a bit of funding, at, maybe like 10K dollars around that. So it was really helpful to really launch in Korea. We had this digital marketing expert to really dive us into the Korean ecosystem of marketing, and this was incredibly helpful, actually.
Wow, and I'm curious, is there like a club of foreign entrepreneurs in Korea? Because I imagine you find each other at events like South Summit.
Right, yeah. So at the time when I started the business, we didn't really have this, but over the last 2 years, the whole foreign community, especially entrepreneurs, have been growing so well. So I think we have around 4 major foreign groups right now, based on Kakao, the messaging platform, as well on Slack. So there are a lot of offers these days to really get knowledge, how to start a business. And I didn't really have it that much at the beginning, except from this mentor pool. So I'm really happy to see this actually happening right now.
I like that, and I like how you're using Slack, you're using different tools that are moving forward. You talked about, on one of our previous meetings, you talked about you were on a mission to create a truly global Korea. So you're one of the few entrepreneurs to be awarded the TIPS grant from the Korean government. I think you were the first foreign entrepreneur, right?
Right.
Could you walk us through a bit through how that process was to apply and to be awarded that, and maybe what tips you would recommend to other founders that could be here in the audience?
Sure. So just a short explanation of what is TIPS. TIPS is an R&D grant by the Korean government, and how it works is you have to have an investor who invests around 100K into you, and then the government five-folds it by investing another 500 million won into you. So it's around 600 million won what you have as a funding budget, and if you're in deep tech, it could be up to 1.5 million dollars additional on top of that. So it's quite a huge grant, and the application phase is also quite tough. So you have to submit a business model in like 40 pages in Korean. It is a lot of administrative work to do, but it's really, really working well. And actually, when it comes to this TIPS program itself, right now I think there are 2,700 startups that have actually successfully granted this budget, and only 2.5% have failed actually. So this was over the last 10 years. The government invested around $1 billion into this program only, and the follow-up investments generated around like $10 billion.
That's crazy. I mean, just being here for a week, we've seen there's a lot of government funding for startups, a lot of investment in that. What would you advise? So there was lots of hurdles, I understand, writing the whole proposal, the business model in Korea. Is there any specific tips? Like if you were to do it again today, what would you tell Dominik from a few years ago?
So I would probably say get started on the whole business model 6 months before, because I was working probably two months, almost every day, full time on just this business presentation model, and then also had to do a presentation in person in Korean, which was one of the toughest presentations ever I had to do.
Did you have to present in Korean as well?
Right.
Wow.
Luckily, it was online, because usually I'm a bit more introvert and scared on the stage, so I was really happy that it was during Corona and online. But yeah, it was tough on that project. So I would recommend anybody, you need to skill up the language, of course. You have to present in Korean. It's a Korean program. And the second part is, if you have a Korean co-founder, everything is much easier, because then a co-founder could present, and that would be definitely a reason.
So as a solo founder, you're like, I would have probably looked for a Korean co-founder.
Yes.
And when you translated the document, did you have someone help you write it, or did you use, tools like AI or ChatGPT?
Yeah, so ChatGPT came out really freshly at that time.
Yeah.
So I used ChatGPT, of course, on actually translation, because DeepL came a bit later on like translation tools. So it really helped me on generating like spell checking kind of translations. So I was writing it in my Korean, and then ChatGPT helped. So that was incredible.
So while we're talking about AI, what's your view on AI today? So we're talking about ChatGPT here in a conversation, but what do you feel will be the impact of AI on different industries? And more specifically, I think I heard that you're starting to use AI in Packative. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so our TIPS R&D grant, actually, what we use is we use it for research on AI, on generative AI for packaging design, meaning right now designers have to know print knowledge. So I'm sure you know this. If you print a paper in your printer in the office, it has a totally different color than the monitor. And those kind of issues also on the large production scale, commercial print. And we actually try to reduce this with AI and have a really print-ready AI design tool. And I think this is really the future for the packaging industry. And when it comes of our usage internally, as this is a research project, so we also use it for like prediction of production cost. We build our own ERP system, supply chain systems where we use AI, and also we will use it more for customer service.
And just so the audience also understands how you're using AI, how does it work? This is an e-commerce, right? So as an end user, I go into the website and I choose what kind of product I want to sell, and the AI designs the packaging, or how does it work?
So the AI part and design is not out yet. It's still in research. But what happens, all of the AI what we use right now is in the back office. Yeah. So when you come on our website, you see a price that is generated based on all of the customization you have, like the size of the packaging, the print and everything. And based on this, a price is generated. And this uses this predictive algorithm what we have in the back end, so that you get a price actually for the production cost. And we're the only ones actually in Korea to do this.
And then that gets produced with a third-party provider and sent to the client, the customer, right?
Right.
That's amazing. So you're a software engineer again. We talked about this. How do you balance hands-on tech? Because I imagine you're super hands-on with all this new AI tech, building the platform, the e-commerce, but you're also leading the business. So how do you balance this, this two sides of the coin?
It's a really good question. It's still, I would say it's still an ongoing challenge for me. So I'm still trying to balance everything. We're a team of 10 people right now, so I have to be more hands-on. All of this algorithms and predictive, what I just mentioned before, was written by me. I have to maintain it. I have to keep developing it. And also, at the beginning, I made a lot of mistakes when it comes to like building a company in Korea on like the society part, the culture development part, because when it comes to Korea, team building happens while you share a meal. Like you go for a dinner, you have lunch together. And I really didn't do this at the beginning, and it needed some time for me to wake up and recognize I have to take the time, I have to go for lunch with my team to really build kind of a trustful relationship.
That's super interesting. I mean, talking about that, are there any specific failures maybe that we could talk, or setbacks that you experienced? Like what were the biggest setbacks you had from maybe not just entrepreneurship, from coming to Korea, from wanting to start a business to starting it? Are there any like highlight setbacks and learnings that you did during this journey?
I'm sure there are many. I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes during the whole building this company phase, and I will probably do a bunch of more in the future. And I hope my team will help me to overcome those. So I think my biggest ones, where I would say this was really a turning point of the company, was at the beginning we searched for some suppliers. Right now we are lucky to have 12 really good suppliers, but at the beginning we weren't so lucky. So I had a lot of trouble with building a supply chain, and we had a lot of complaints, customer complaints, and dealing with this as a non-Korean with really quite old people, it was really challenging. And what I learned from it is you have to build a really incredibly good team. So even though I would say like I'm a bit handicapped to be not Korean actually, that my team kind of makes up for this part actually.
Yeah, and I think, are there these nuances as well that as a Westerner in Korea, they have more flexibility maybe with some things, knowing that you don't know all the exact processes? How's your experience been with that?
I think so for the beginning. I think it's okay if you're fresh in Korea. I think if you're already 10 years in Korea, this kind of benefit doesn't really exist anymore, and they have high expectations from you, which is totally fair, I would say. And then, of course, when it comes to business and anybody operating their own business, everybody is protective about their business, right? Yeah. So I don't have this benefit then anymore with like dealing with factories, I would say.
That's amazing. So when you started Packative at the beginning, very, very beginning, was this a bootstrapped company? Did you get funding, family and friends? What was sort of that process to sort of start from zero? Because now you got the grant, and I understand you're also seeing plans to expand out of Korea. But just take me back. How was those initial steps?
Sure. So thanks to this mentoring program, I had this mentor for pitching actually, and this guy, he was working for a VC, and then he said, "Oh, I really like the idea. Let's talk seriously about this." And then we pitched in the office, and a few months later we closed our investment. So I would say the first year we bootstrapped till we launched. Then we got pretty early on investment of a corporate VC. Then we could really prolong the whole time for 1.5 years, and then early 2023 we closed our pre-A round with a great VC here, American Korean VC. So
wow.
yeah, we were really lucky to have funds from the beginning, and we're still fundraising right now. So it's the next challenge right now to get to a Series A stage. Yeah.
Amazing. And do you have plans to expand into other regions? I think we talked about this on one of our calls. You're expanding, well, tell us a bit about that. What are your plans beyond Korea? And this is very interesting as a foreigner, living in Korea, starting a company in Korea. It's grown a gazillion times. Now, what are your next plans? What's next? Are you going to other Asian countries? Are you moving to Europe? What's next on your roadmap?
Yeah, so of course my vision is the whole world to be conquered by Packative, but we have to make a start somewhere. So whenever I meet a VC or investor, there's one thing I always tell them: I have done an expansion already. Like coming to Korea, building a company here is pretty much an expansion already for me as an Austrian. So doing the same thing right now, going back to Europe, it's much easier for me because I have a network there.
Yeah.
So of course Europe is one of the next targets. We're working with a European company right now on the expansion prototype, which makes it really easy for us to do a soft launch there. So this will be probably happening next year. And then of course Asia is one of the regions that is really where we are, right? So we also should expand within the next 3 years to especially emerging markets. They need a lot of packaging. Middle class is growing a lot. That means e-commerce is growing at the same time. E-commerce also needs packaging. Yeah.
And actually very curious. So Korea has a very interesting tech ecosystem, right? So you have Naver, we have Kakao. There's these sort of like siloed ecosystems that work only in Korea. I mean, you can use them other. What's it been like building a tech company in Korea? Are there certain protocols or limitations that you found from the tech side that would limit how you can expand beyond Korea?
Yeah, so actually there was one big thing. So at the beginning, especially when it comes to like software development in Europe, you have different stacks on like development stacks. So I was in an enterprise kind of customers. So the stack that I used to use didn't exist in Korea, or it's not as broad. So hiring people to maintain the code was incredibly difficult. So we had over the last year, we had to make a change of all of our tech stack so I can hire people locally. And that was a challenge actually, yeah. So there's a difference.
And how about your engineers? Because engineers from Korea probably are more used to a local tech stack, but if you want to build an international platform, you need to think about, you'll use some kind of software code that will allow you to sort of go beyond.
Yeah.
Did you have challenges in that as well?
So to overcome actually the challenges with the tech, I hired also people to come to Korea. So I hired French guys to come to Korea. I did the visa sponsoring for them. So I built more of a global kind of team. And for me also local hiring means not Korean anymore. This is what I really try to promote with Global Korea. It's also about hiring global talents locally in Korea. So for me to build a company, a true global company, it's really this combination of like also in office that we can have a global team, that we have an English culture, English speaking culture mixed with Korean. And there are few companies who have actually done this successful also in Korea. I'm not sure if you have heard of Coupang, for example.
Yeah, of course.
And they do this really successfully, actually.
And in this sense, your company, so most of your employees, how big is the company right now?
So we are around 10 people right now.
How many of those employees are Korean?
So 7 out of them are Korean, and 3 are, including me,
including yourself,
not Korean.
And you were just talking about team culture. How is the interaction between? Do you all communicate in English, or I'm really curious on how that works.
Yeah, so it's still a bit tricky. So I'm still trying to solve it. The tricky part is when it comes to operational side, sales side, our customers are Korean, so our employees don't have to speak English on that part.
Yeah.
So industry experts from packaging usually also don't speak English. So my sales operation side is more Korean, and my product team is more English. And what I did right now to solve this is my middle management is bilingual. So having like these bridges in between really helps to connect. And also what I did at the beginning is to support my foreign employees with language classes.
Yeah.
So yeah, this really helped them to get started.
And how are you, I'm really curious on how are you building your work culture? So we were talking with another speaker yesterday about how he's building culture to sort of mimic more of a Western culture in hours of work, in vacation times. Are you doing something similar? How are you sort of helping your employees, adjust their mindset to more of an international perspective rather than just locally Korea?
I think in general, when it comes to like this Western work culture on Korea, I think I have a bit more of a conservative approach, I would say.
Yeah.
I'm not a too big believer in remote work in Korea, and that's not because I don't believe in remote work. It's more of like a cultural thing. Most of the people live with their parents together. You have less private space. You have less space to concentrate. Yeah. So this is impacting the business operation. That's why my opinion is a bit more conservative on this one. And I try to compensate it with way of like workation. They can, especially my foreign employees, I understand that maybe on Christmas you want to go home for 2 weeks, 3 weeks and see your family, that we can also do some vacation there then and work from there for our company. So instead of having regular remote work, it's kind of bundled in like a vacation kind of.
That's amazing. I'd like to open up to the audience. I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question that they'd like to ask Dominik. Any founders? Alex? I don't know if you have a microphone.
Oh, I have a mic, so that's great. So Dominik, thank you very much for sharing. It's truly amazing what you've built, and thank you for sharing, because it's a very rare occasion to actually listen to this. I was just wondering, as you were going back and forth with building the team, right, and how it requires trust. So I'm wondering how you got the first team member, like the first Korean that trusted you to actually, hey, this Austrian is not crazy, and this is a cool place to work. Because I'm guessing there's a big friction here in terms of, I don't want to work for a company from a foreigner. I want to work for, big corporation or something like that. So how do you manage to, I was going to say convince or, razzle-dazzle them to work for you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think one of the things what I was clear from the beginning is, especially at the beginning, if you work with me, you work in an English-speaking environment. And so basically, it's kind of like a English work experience class. A lot of people pay for that to go abroad, have an internship abroad, but they can do this actually in Korea as well. So I think this was actually really attractive for most of the, especially young and early entry juniors. And this really helped to get a lot of applications at the beginning. And I started out with an intern at the beginning, also provided by the Seoul Global Startup Center. And then later on, it was just a normal process of hiring people, trying to open up the vision of being more of a global company. And yeah, I think it worked out.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else that has a question? Well, I have a question. What's next? No, actually, I have another question before that, more related to what Alex mentioned. So if I were an entrepreneur in Europe, so you started in Korea, but what advice would you give an entrepreneur or a founder that is in Europe and looking to expand into Asia, specifically into Korea? So I think that's probably slightly different to your experience, because you were in Korea, you sort of got your work experience before building the company. But if, for example, I were to bring a company to Korea, what advice would you give me to setting up my first team here and putting everything together, setting up the company, corporation? What tips would you give someone like that?
So I think like something like South Summit is the best opportunity to come to Korea, explore Korea, see how Korea works, and also see the differences of how different Korea is.
Yeah.
And the most important part is you have to build your network early on, which maybe I didn't do as good at the beginning, and this would be my biggest advice, that you build a really strong network, because Korea is a incredibly social country. Everything works over connections. Everything works about how much I like you.
Yeah.
So it is really important to have this network. And by building this, you can really then also make expansion much easier, having your first hire already. And yeah.
And would you, when you talk about building this network, I think that I agree completely. I think anywhere you moved, so I've lived in several places. When I moved to Spain originally, I did a similar strategy. It's go to events, talk to people, just to as many people as you can, maybe even join one of these companies. But like, what kind of strategies? So I understand, like, for example, here in Korea, from September towards the end of the year, there are lots and lots and lots of events. So I think it comes to a point where there's so many events then that they start having less value. So less value for building your network. Are there like smaller meetups or communities that you would also recommend?
Yeah, so there's Seoul Startups, the Slack community, what I mentioned before, that you can check out. Then there's this other really community that I'm really loving is the Garrison. They have a Kakao kind of group, and actually Riza was also a speaker here at the South Summit. So he built an incredibly great network for foreign entrepreneurs. So yeah, I think those two.
I think he was speaking here earlier this morning.
Right, yeah.
That's amazing. Any last-minute advice or words or aspiring advice that you'd give to founders that might be here in the audience?
So I would say when you build a startup in general, you need a lot of resilience. If you come into a completely new country, of course it requires even more resilience. And as I said, network. So those two things in combination, I think if you bring this to the table and you really manage those things, then it will be much easier to actually start your business.
Would you say you need to be extra resilient to be a Western founder in Korea?
I think at the current stage, still yes. There are not that many global startups yet in Korea.
Yeah.
I highly believe that over the next 10 years, this will work out really well. Just looking at the history of the last 40 years, Korea being one of the poorest country and now one of the most developed countries. And they're really listening right now and enabling events, global events, and global inbound startups and outbound at the same time. So I think like looking into this proof already, there will be more startups coming, and then it will also get easier, but it still takes some time. So right now, if you come to Korea, there's a lot of support system already, but not as much maybe as we see in the States or Europe yet for diverse kind of founders.
And going back to what we mentioned earlier, you're on a mission to create a truly global Korea. What are you doing from where you are now to help build that community?
So I try to share as much as possible on like the process. That's one part. The second part is I believe when it comes to a global Korea, it requires talents. And it's not just about becoming a Korean startup expanding. I think this is also one part, but it's more like inbound, like startups coming here, building a kind of Western integrated foreign community, diverse, I would say is a better word for that. And this, like building this diverse community, this makes it actually truly global.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And just to finish off, if you could say something to entrepreneurs in Europe that could be interested in coming to Korea, what would you tell them?
I would tell them there's so many programs right now from most of the embassies to come to Korea, to explore Korea. I know from the Austrian embassy, I think the Spanish embassy runs some program. Most of the European countries have these programs right now. Additionally, the Korean government has a lot of support programs. So really try to explore those programs and come to Korea, look at how well everything is working, and maybe then it convinces you yourself, the country, to get started here.
That's amazing. We need to come more often to Korea. Thank you, Dominik. It was amazing having you, and I look forward to chatting a bit more off stage.
Thank you.
Thank you.